Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill, a show where we talk about bitter pills of truth that people don't want to hear, don't want to swallow, but it's best that they did. And today I'm joined by, I guess, Misty Winston of co-host of Action for Assange and the Facts on the Ground podcast with Jesse. What's his name? Sorry.
Zerwell.
Zerwell. Yeah. And so Misty's been, she's all over, kind of a Renaissance woman in terms of her scope of knowledge about different issues, but a lot of her focus recently has been on the Assange case, Julian Assange, who's been being persecuted by the U.S. government for his revelations about war crimes and all sorts of other nasty stuff that not only the U.S. government but many governments around the world have engaged in. And so we wanted to just discuss different aspects of that today and give people kind of a general overview of his case and why it's important. Well, so, do you want to just start with talking about the specifics of Julian Assange's case? Just kind of I don't know, an abstract or overview, Misty?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Okay, so the extradition hearing right now is in its second week. Well, it's technically in its third week. There was a week held in February, and then there were some scheduling issues prosecution couldn't be there this day, defense couldn't be here this day. So it got pushed to September for the finality of the extradition hearing. So there was a week in February. There are supposed to be 4 weeks now in September. Given all of the delays and technical issues, I'm not sure they're going to be able to get through all 39 witnesses in 4 weeks, but we'll see. But we are currently in the second week of those projected 4 weeks. And we've seen a lot of really interesting expert witnesses so far. It's been an interesting glance at the UK legal system as well as the United States influence over the UK legal system. But yeah, so far we're just in the second week and we're trying to make as much noise as possible. Because at this point, I think it's clear that we're not going to be able to get, like a legal response to this, where it's going to take immense public pressure for us to make any difference in this case right now.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at currently.
Yeah. And just for anybody who doesn't know, I assume most people watching this show know this, but Julian Assange is the founder of WikiLeaks, which is an organization that receives documents anonymously from whistleblowers who know about corruption or evil deeds by governments and corporations all over the world, and vets that information. So far, they have a 100% record of putting out accurate information, and then puts it out for people to use as a resource to report on or investigate or take action on these various misdeeds by different governments. And so I guess the main focus of the case, right? Well, so Assange first became famous in WikiLeaks when they investigated or they received information about war crimes by the U.S. in Iraq and Afghanistan, brought to them primarily by, at that time, Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, who was, I forget what his rank was in the military, and I think they had some other sources of information, or did it all come from Chelsea Manning, the Afghan war logs? What's that?
Yeah, all of those leaks came from Chelsea Manning.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we impress upon people that is what he is being charged with. A lot of people are still under the assumption that this has anything to do with the 2016 election. It does not. This has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton's emails, Nessa's emails, the DNC leaks. This is all to do with the 2010 releases of things like the collateral murder video, the Afghan and Iraq war logs. That's what he is being charged with now. So I think it's good to clear that up. I think there are some people out there who are still misunderstanding what he's actually being charged with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a point of confusion because it was the Trump administration who actually went through with arresting him and charging him with things, whereas the Obama administration didn't. And so people might be misled into thinking, well, no, I guess that wouldn't make sense. Never mind. But it is kind of odd that the Trump administration went after him at first glance because it's assumed that Assange was out to help Trump or something, and by putting out documents showing the corruption of Hillary Clinton and the upper echelons of the Democratic Party, where they basically rigged a primary, the 2016 primaries against Bernie Sanders, and all sorts of stuff about the corruption of Hillary Clinton and other Democrats in terms of their having a public versus private position on issues where they would reassure their corporate donors it's okay, we're not going to really do anything to hurt your interests, and just these huge speaking fees for telling these corporations what they wanted to hear, and so forth. But as you said, that's not what Julian Assange is being prosecuted for. He's being prosecuted for showing that these horrible war crimes happened that the Obama administration didn't prosecute folks from the Bush administration for, and they kind of started the ball rolling on going after Assange, but didn't pull the trigger because basically they concluded, what has Assange done any differently than what mainstream news outlets do? They actually disclose many of the same or much of the same information that Julian Assange did.
And that's why this case is so critical for people to pay attention to, because that is true. The Obama administration did not go after Assange for a very good reason. The implications that this has on the First Amendment are extraordinary. We've never seen anything like this before. We've never seen a journalist be attacked like this before. And it's not something that we should take lightly at all. I don't know why Trump decided to go after Assange at this point. I think it's very likely that he is just being used. They know that he doesn't care. And so they can just kind of bully him into pushing it through. Maybe part of it is that he wants to one-up Obama. Well, Obama wouldn't do it, so I will. I don't know why he's choosing to go after him. Like you said, all through the election, I love WikiLeaks. I love the WikiLeaks. He was all about it when it was helping him win a campaign. But now that he's in office, suddenly he wants to send Julian to Belmarsh and extradite him and possibly stick him in some, hole in a prison in East Virginia, under special administrative measures. So I don't know why he's doing that, but I think that this is that really underlines why this case is so important. This is literally, and I know this sounds dramatic. I hate, saying it in such a dramatic fashion, but this is literally free press on the line. The future of adversarial journalism, investigative journalism, it's on the line right now. This is it. If we can't stop this extradition from happening, the ramifications are going to be immense. I mean, it's going to be hard to even measure as we move forward.
Yeah. Some people say, why doesn't he just, if he's innocent of these charges, why doesn't he just, face the charges and go to trial. But what people don't realize is that the U.S. He's their enemy. He's trying to disclose secrets that they don't want the public to know about, and so what they basically do with any whistleblower or journalist like Julian Assange who receives information from whistleblowers. Well, I guess they haven't done it to journalists too much in recent years because they failed to be able to do it to Daniel Ellsberg. But what they do with whistleblowers is they send them to this court in Northern Virginia, where the CIA and other intelligence services and government agencies are located, and the likely jury pool, and of course they can pick who's going to be on the jury, is people who are sympathetic to the prosecution. And so, what's his name? John Kiriakou is a whistleblower who was prosecuted in this court, and he had a lawyer who had basically never lost a case, or I guess he was a jury consultant, and they had never lost a case. And he told John Kiriakou, "Look, this is a kangaroo court. There's absolutely no way we can win here. Even though if you were in any other court in the United States, you would be able to beat these charges. So you better take a plea deal." So that's what Julian Assange is facing if he gets extradited to the United States from Britain, where he's currently residing in a maximum security prison, Belmarsh prison. And
yes, and that defendant has never won a case in that court. It's never happened.
Yeah.
The idea that he would get a fair trial in the United States is ridiculous. Anybody who is making that claim is not paying attention, or they're lying. He would not get a fair trial. There's absolutely no way that would happen. He's not getting a fair trial now. The extradition hearings are a joke. If anybody's been watching them, it's laughable, the things that they're doing, the things that they're getting away with, which is another reason why we really need people to pay more attention to this, because the things that they're doing to him that are completely illegal. I mean, they hired a Spanish security firm to spy on him in the embassy. He wasn't able to see his lawyers for 6 months. The first day that he saw them in 6 months was the first day of this beginning of the 4 weeks of the extradition hearing. So he's up against the United States government in one of the biggest, most complicated cases with a ton of evidence and discovery to go through. And he wasn't able to meet with his lawyers for 6 months. That's insane. Yeah. I can't imagine trying to put a case together or participate in your own defense. He asked for a computer. They glued his keys down. I mean, the things that they're doing to him, if you think they're going to stop with just him, you're wrong. If they get away with doing it to him, they're going to do it to all of us. It won't stop there. They're setting a precedent now, and they're kind of manufacturing this consent for this sort of treatment. And we really need people to pay more attention to this, because what they're getting away with is not good.
Yeah. So maybe we should dive into a little more detail now on what exactly they're accusing him of, and just let this has been a 10-year-long campaign by the U.S. government to go after Assange and to, as you said, manufacture consent for his prosecution or persecution, etc., to kind of villainize him. Maybe we could talk about just the whole plot by the U.S. government.
That's a really good point. Currently, there was an indictment with 17 charges. Then there was a superseding indictment. The biggest thing that they're trying to get him on is they're trying to allege that he participated in or aided Chelsea Manning in hacking the information that was released. This is not true. Chelsea Manning already had access to this information. She had the clearance, all of those things she had access to. So there was no hacking. He was not involved in any hacking. He didn't help her with any password to get any information. The only things that he did is what every good journalist on earth does. Even terrible journalists like those that, the New York Times or the Washington Post, they all do the same things that he's done. He contacted a source. He discussed the information that was available. He took measures to keep her identity secret, try to protect his source. Those are the only things that he did. But they're trying to allege that he participated in the quote-unquote hacking of this information in order to release it. So that they're trying to sort of twist definitions and, pretzel themselves into a narrative that makes sense. But the truth is, if you look at it, like you said, there's been a 10-year. They've had 10 years. They've had 10 years to develop a case, and this is the best they could come up with.
Yeah.
That should tell you something.
Yes.
It's a wishy-washy, weak case that really doesn't hold any ground. If any objective, I'm not a lawyer, but I can objectively look at this case and know that it's crap. So, I mean, in 10 years, this is the best they could come up with. But over the course of those 10 years, they have launched a really kind of, it's sort of awe-inspiring in like a sick way. They have spent an amazing amount of time, money, and resources to destroy one man. It's smear after smear after smear, lie after lie after lie. And if you go back and look at all of the things that they've done, it's kind of incredible that this much effort has gone into destroying just a single human being.
Yeah.
But that's what they've done. That's what they do. And
I forget where I saw this, but it actually has been discovered that there was like a plan to smear him in order to be able to bring him and WikiLeaks down. They hatched as soon as WikiLeaks started releasing significant documents back around 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in that neighborhood. So they've planned this all along.
Yeah, that came out in a WikiLeaks leak. They also had the plan that they were just going to tie him up in court cases for the next 25 years, which they're currently doing. Yeah. Basically, I think that he is the proverbial head on a stake. He is the warning. Like Chuck Schumer said on one of the Sunday morning news shows in 2016, you should know better than to mess with the intelligence agencies because they have 6 ways to Sunday to mess with you back. And that's what they're doing. He exposed their crimes. He embarrassed them. And it has now been a trail of vengeance ever since. And it's multiple different countries. All of the Five Eyes countries have been involved with the help of Ecuador. And they basically bought him from Ecuador and trafficked him from the embassy to Belmarsh. So, it's been a really intense attack on Julian Assange and on WikiLeaks. But the incredible thing about that is, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and the Vault 7 leaks came out in 2017. So in the middle of all of the chaos, living in the Ecuadorian embassy for years, knowing that he's a target, knowing that they're likely going to come and get him at any day, he releases the biggest leaks, CIA leaks in history. That takes some balls.
Yeah,
I mean,
no kidding.
He's already a target.
Yeah, he was basically
he
imprisoned in the embassy at that point. Had been for 5 years, I guess. But
that's incredible to have that courage.
Yeah, but the Vault 7 release, just for those of you who don't know the specifics of some of WikiLeaks' bigger scoops, it was information about all the different ways that the intelligence agencies have to spy on us, to hack into our electronic devices, to conceal their identity and pose as anyone. Like they, if they wanted to, I'm not saying they did this, but if they wanted to, they could pretend to be Russians hacking into whoever's computer, and then they could say, "Oh, look, the Russians hacked into the Democrats' computers or the Republicans' computers or whoever," and launch a whole fake news campaign based around that. So anyway, that's what the Vault 7 release was about. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your train of thought. I just wanted people to know what that was.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But yeah, I just, there's a lot of moving parts in this case. There's been a decade-long, like we said, propaganda campaign waged against this guy, and that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get the legal outcome that we want without immense public pressure. I mean, we really are going to need an army standing up and speaking out against this. And I'm hopeful that we can get some more people speaking out. I've been trying really hard to do just that. I think a lot of people are blissfully ignorant as to how dire this situation is for all of us. So
yeah, for sure. But maybe we could just talk about some of the most common smears that have been thrown at Julian and why they're false. And then, just to you back up and look at the situation without considering whether any of these things are true. I mean, this is a witch hunt against someone who has disclosed embarrassing secrets about wrongdoing by the U.S. Government and lots of other entities, but it's the U.S. government that's going after him. So even if he were like this horrible person that the U.S. has made him out to be, it would still be the case that they are in violation of international as well as U.S. and other laws going after him for doing what any journalist does who deals with telling people about government secrets or corporate secrets or whatever that involve corruption or harm doing. But in any case, there's been this smear campaign. What are some of the most common things that have been thrown at Julian, and what's wrong with these claims?
Well, I think one of my favorite ones is that he's a Russian agent who was trying to help Trump.
Yeah.
Julian has always been pretty apolitical. He, in fact, likened the choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton to the choice between gonorrhea and syphilis.
Yeah.
I don't know his personal politics. If I had to guess, I'd say he leans left libertarian. But he didn't help the Russians. Over and over again, that's been debunked. The United States government has admitted that there's no evidence for that.
Yes.
But people still, to this day, I see it every day on Twitter when I post about Assange. There's always at least one turd who rolls into my mentions to tell me that he's, a Russian agent who helped Putin to help Trump. And it's a ridiculous notion. It was ridiculous when it was first said, but now, after the Mueller report and the Senate intelligence report, there's no evidence for it. There's zero evidence for it. There has been a monumental effort to find evidence for that, and they can't find any.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my favorite ones, just because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and even if it were,
I think some of the other. Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, even if it were true that it was the Russians from whom Assange got this information about Democratic Party corruption that WikiLeaks released. I mean, it was all true. And so
that's an
amazing
point. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
It was.
That's an amazing point. I think people need to recognize that Julian Assange, first and foremost, is a journalist.
Yes.
And if he receives information and is able to verify that it's true and it's within the public interest to publish it, he's going to publish it. Any journalist who claims that they wouldn't do the same is either not a good journalist or they're lying to you. That's his job. That's the whole point. So even if it came directly from Vladimir Putin himself, I don't care if Vladimir Putin delivered it, on a gold platter wrapped with a bow. That doesn't matter. It doesn't change the content of what was released.
Yeah.
And frankly, that doesn't even have anything to do with his case. Like I said, he's not being charged with anything related to 2016. So that's a nice smear tactic to get people to feel a certain way about Julian Assange and to be okay with what's happening to him. But it has nothing to do with the case at hand. So, I mean, while that's a great point, it really just doesn't have anything to do with what's happening to him now.
Yeah, it's irrelevant to the case, and also it's just pushing this crazy notion that somehow revealing true information about something negative about a political party or candidate is election interference. No, it's not. It's like giving voters information on which they can base their choices among candidates. So it's just this illegitimate narrative that it ties right in with what I've heard over and over from Biden supporters this time. Basically, shut up about Biden's imperfections, quote unquote, because we need to get Trump out of the White House, and you don't want to get voters to think twice about not voting Trump out. So shut your mouth.
And you're so right. If there weren't any emails to release, if those emails had been benign and it hadn't showed any corruption or evidence of rigging the election, there wouldn't have been need to publish them. So stop shooting the messenger and be mad at the people who wrote the damn emails.
Right.
That's not on Julian Assange. That's on them. Right. He did his job to inform the public about a potential president, somebody who wants to run the country, who was rigging an election. She rigged an election. People are all up in arms right now about election fraud and all of this stuff. Well, okay, you have evidence right here of a rigged election. You shouldn't be mad at Julian Assange for showing you that evidence. You should be mad at the people who rigged the election.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
But you're fine. Some of my other favorite smears, though, are the ones that attack him personally.
Yeah.
Like you said before, it doesn't really matter who he is. I don't know him. I've never met him. People I have spoken to who know him and who have met him say he's lovely and he's funny and he's very sarcastic and he's very kind and whatever. But I've never met him, so I'm not going to make a personal judgment on him. But there are so many smears about his character, about how he's a narcissist and he's an asshole and he's unclean and he wouldn't clean his cat's litter box and he smeared poop on the walls of the embassy and all of these ridiculous infantile things that, even if true, have no bearing on what's happening to him. I don't care if he's the biggest jerk on earth. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Your personality should not enter into this conversation when we're talking about publishing pristine source documentation that is valuable to the people and to our ability to govern our country and to move through the world. These are things that we are entitled to know, especially the evidence of war crimes. I can't imagine anyone being okay with our military conducting the kinds of things that we now have clear evidence of. I can't imagine any American citizen being okay with that. And the only reason we know about it is because of the bravery of Chelsea Manning and the bravery of Julian Assange. And so I don't care if he's a jerk. The fact that he exposed that kind of corruption and that kind of wrongdoing should always be celebrated.
Yes.
So, attacking his personal character or his hygiene, all of that stuff is just noise to make people feel a certain way about him so that they can do terrible things to him and people won't care. Exactly. That's all that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And, the nature of the things that, those documents that came from and videos that came from Chelsea Manning revealed were just horrifying. They showed U.S. troops basically executing, civilians, including, journalists and, healthcare workers.
360-degree murder.
What's that?
John Pilger called it 360-degree murder.
Yeah.
Because in the helicopter they circled around and shot the first group of people and then continued to circle around. And when the first responders showed up, they slaughtered them too, which is called a double tap. And that's a war crime. Yeah. It's horrific. And in the video, they're speaking as if it's a video game. Light them up and come on, shoot. And, making all these comments like they're playing some, shoot 'em up Xbox game or something crazy. And it just shows the callousness and the complete detachment from humanity that's happening
And this is just that incident that's become so famous is just the one that they happen to catch on video, and the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs reveal that there were, who knows how many such incidents, and also that the U.S.
numerous examples of yes,
and that the U.S. In order to be able to kind of sort of wash their hands of it, didn't do it themselves, but they, like gave their seal of approval tacitly to Iraqi military groups that they were collaborating with to torture people. And that happened over and over and over again. And that's another thing that WikiLeaks brought out, thanks to Chelsea Manning.
And again, that's something else that Barack Obama chose not to prosecute people for. So
Right.
2 people exposed an unbelievable amount of corruption and war crimes and torture, and they're the only 2 people who have ever seen the inside of a courtroom for any of that.
Right.
Not a single person involved with the actual committing of the war crimes has ever seen even the tiniest amount of trouble. And that's a backwards world to live in. That's not the kind of world I want to live in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different. The John Kiriakou leaks. He's the only one who ever got in trouble for that stuff. He also exposed torture, United States committing torture, and he's the only one who's ever gotten in trouble for that. That's crazy to me, that more people aren't upset by the fact that we're punishing the truth tellers and not the criminals. It's
So on one hand, Julian Assange has all these smears thrown at him for revealing these crimes, and meanwhile, the attitude toward George Bush, now that it's been so long since he was president, is, oh, look, he's an artist. He's painting these great stuff. And, gee, what a nice guy he is. And he's, one of the people responsible for some of the worst war crimes in modern history. And he's painted as this decent human being.
And he's dancing on Ellen, and handing Michelle Obama candy at funerals, and she's hugging him and saying that, he's like a brother to her. And that's gross. I mean, he's a war criminal, one of the worst. And he's never going to see the inside of a courtroom. He's never going to spend a minute in jail. He's never going to be penalized or punished in any way for the things that he did. And that's disturbing. That's a really disturbing trend. Not trend. I mean, it's really just built into our country. The powerful are always protected. That's something I would really like to see us knock off.
Yeah. Well, one thing that, and Caitlin Johnstone, in her very comprehensive article that rebutted all the smears that have been leveled against Julian Assange, which I will post in the description of the video, one thing she said was that one of the hardest smears for people trying to defend Julian Assange to deal with is this claim that he's assaulted women and so forth. And there's quite a few people who regard themselves as being on the left and are generally in line with progressive views on a lot of issues who believe that this is the case because like most of us tend to believe women when they say that men have assaulted them or whatnot. And so, if somebody has that objection, like, okay, I agree that the U.S. Needs to be held accountable for war crimes, but what about Julian Assange? Shouldn't he be held accountable for what he's been accused of? So, I mean, how do you respond to that?
This is the trickiest smear to handle, and it is because it deals with sexual assault. Like you said, you always want to believe the victim. I'm somebody who likes to believe the victim. And So it is really difficult to navigate this without coming off like a jerk, or that you don't care, or that you're okay with rape or whatever. I get that a lot. Oh, you're a rapist apologist. That's ridiculous. I understand that those are very serious allegations. It's been very muddled. First of all, there were never any charges. That is something that a lot of people do not know. Julian Assange was never charged in that case. There were accusations. There was an investigation. There were never charges brought.
It's important to note that the accusations actually came from Swedish prosecutors. They didn't come from the women. They thought that he had done something wrong by, not informing them of his status as far as sexually transmitted diseases and so forth before he had sex with them without using a condom. But they never accused him of rape.
Well, here's the thing. In Sweden, rape has a very different definition. In Sweden, it can be anything, like you said, to not disclosing your status for STDs. What happened in Julian's case is that in the middle of intercourse, he removed a condom. That in Sweden is under a rape charge. So that in the United States wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, be labeled as rape. So it's a little bit different. But you're right. Neither of the two women involved in this situation wanted to press charges. They have both publicly said that they were very much kind of bullied into making this a bigger deal than it needed to be. And in fact, one of the women didn't even write her own statement. They ended up writing it for her.
And she didn't sign it.
So what's that?
She refused to sign it.
Yes. Yeah. So she refused to sign it because she didn't write it. They wrote it for her and were trying to get her to sign it. The one woman was literally crying in the police station in Sweden because she didn't want to press charges and they were forcing her to do so, which I think is incredibly distasteful. This is a woman who's coming to you just because she wants to know if she can ask this man to take an HIV test, and now you're bullying her into prosecuting or charging him with something that he didn't do and that she's not claiming he did. So I think that that's a very important thing for people to know. I also think it's very important for people to stop for a second and not, when you hear somebody charged with sexual assault, it's very easy to immediately go to rage and disgust. And, I get that. But I think people need to take a step back for a second and look at who we're talking about. In any ordinary situation, yes, you should absolutely believe the victim. But this is a man who is public enemy number one to every powerful government on earth.
Yeah.
It's not out of the realm of possibility that they're just making this up to make him look bad. Yeah. There's also a lot of misinformation that he refused to cooperate with the Swedish government. That's a lie. Yeah. He, on multiple occasions, volunteered to participate in an investigation. He volunteered multiple times to be interviewed by Swedish police. Yeah. Before he left Sweden.
Yeah,
when it was first coming out, he asked permission before he left.
And he had things he had to do
every way that he should.
Yeah, and he had WikiLeaks business that he needed to do in other countries. Like he had conferences he was going to talk at, I guess, and other things. And he stayed in Sweden waiting for them to interview him. And, they never did.
And before he did finally leave, he asked permission from the prosecutor if it was okay that he could go. And they said yes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people know that. I think a lot of that whole... the whole sexual assault allegations and that's why it's so tough, because they've done a very good job. And it's not like this is the first time that they've used these types of smears against somebody that they don't like. This is an easy smear to get to stick. It leaves people with a certain impression of you. It's very hard to shake that kind of reputation or having that label attached to you. So they use it all the time. And it's
political.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, political prisoners in the United States have been falsely accused of murder, many times in our history.
Leonard Pelletier.
Yes. Yeah.
But yes, so it's it's really unfortunate that this is something that's used as kind of a political hammer to whack people around with that our government doesn't like. It really diminishes actual real cases of sexual assault, and it really harms the, believe the victim narrative, because, when somebody lies about a situation like this or uses it as a smear to hurt a political opponent, it diminishes the ability for other women to tell their truth and for people to have people believe them.
Yeah.
So it's really unfortunate, but these people there is no low for them. There's no bottom. They will do anything that they have to do. So that's definitely a difficult smear to navigate through.
Yeah.
Caitlin's piece is really great at kind of walking people through how best to sort of deal with it.
Yeah.
It's a really tough one. A lot of people aren't going to want to hear the truth because it is such a kind of inflammatory accusation.
Yeah.
But you just kind of have to do the best that you can.
Yeah.
And just show people the evidence.
Yeah. And
the evidence speaks for itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, go ahead.
And, an important thing for people to bear in mind is just, the government levels these kinds of accusations when it's convenient. There's no principle of protecting women or whatnot involved, because you look at how they have just totally swept under the rug the allegations by multiple women against Joe Biden for various sorts of sexual harassment or assault. And in fact, it's been so swept under the... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you brought up another really good point too. The rape allegations, those are a completely separate issue. So, should he fit? Sweden has dropped the case. There were never any charges. They've dropped the investigation. They picked it back up. They dropped it again. I think they've picked it back up recently. But if that's something that he needs to go to Sweden to deal with, okay, fine. I'm willing. I'm sure he would love to have his day in court where he could defend himself. But it doesn't have anything to do with what he's being prosecuted with now.
Yeah.
It's an entirely separate issue, an entirely separate case, and it should have no bearing on what's happening.
Yeah.
And another good way to debunk, or not debunk, but to kind of combat this smear is Nils Melzer, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on torture.
Yeah.
He is somebody who actually gives me a tiny bit of hope in dealing with this situation, because when first approached to take a look at this case, he really didn't want to. He kind of had bought into the propaganda, and he had kind of a bad feeling about Assange. He didn't really want to look into it. He forced himself to do so, and once he did, he's written a couple articles about it. He has even said that there's no evidence that there was ever any rape, and that, he, despite having, to kind of begrudgingly be pulled into looking at the case, now that he's one of Assange's loudest supporters now. Yeah. He allowed himself to look at the evidence and realize that he had been manipulated by this propaganda campaign, and he changed his mind. And he's now one of our best advocates out there fighting for Julian Assange and for free speech. So, if anybody's having trouble dealing with that smear, and it is difficult to navigate through, but there are, like, Caitlin's article is great. And like I said, Nils Melzer has done a couple different interviews and written an article, I believe, really going into detail about how all of these Sweden allegations played out, and how it's just very apparent that there's nothing there. There really just isn't anything there.
Yeah, and I should mention this so we think of it later, but if you could give me links to those Nils Melzer articles, so I'll put those in the description as well. But kind of a related claim to all this is that a lot of people falsely believe that Julian sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London because of the Swedish allegations, which, they're allegations, not charges. But they claimed that he was seeking to avoid extradition to Sweden for that. So maybe we could talk about why.
Well, and I
really
think that Yeah, I don't think that he was necessarily concerned about being extradited to Sweden. I think he was concerned about being extradited to Sweden, who would then send him to the United States.
Exactly.
That has always been his concern. People for the longest time said that he was paranoid and that, that wasn't going to happen and you should just go and deal with the Swedish case. And it turns out that he had every right to be paranoid, and that was exactly what the plan was. And so, yes, he wasn't seeking asylum because of the Swedish case. He was seeking asylum because he knew the Swedish case was going to be used to get him to the United States.
Right.
And he was right.
Yes.
So that's a big. People are very misinformed about that situation, which is, it's easy to be misinformed because he sought extradition following the Swedish charges coming out. But his concern then, which has now been proven to have been a justifiable concern, was that if he was extradited to Sweden, he would then be sent to the United States. And we all know he won't get a fair trial and fair treatment in the U.S. So
Yeah.
he had every right to be concerned about that, and made the right choice in seeking asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Well, in Ecuador, but then got stuck in the embassy.
Yeah, and the former president of Ecuador, who was president at the time, Rafael Correa, has said, we knew he was going to be extradited to the United States if he didn't get help from somewhere. We were very convinced of that. And so that's why we offered him asylum. So it's not just Julian Assange, paranoid Julian Assange or whatever, that's saying this. The Ecuadorian government at the time was saying this. And, the Ecuadorian government now is very conservative and no longer sympathetic to Julian Assange. That's how it happened that he was able to be arrested by British authorities because the new government allowed that to happen. But originally,
I don't necessarily know if they're super conservative, but Moreno was definitely bought off.
Yeah.
He got a $4.5 billion IMF loan, and he needed that. So he was definitely, Julian Assange was literally sold from Moreno to the United States. It's a disgusting fact, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Correa was awesome. And I think a lot of people also fail to realize that it's not, Julian Assange just can't walk into the Ecuadorian embassy and say, you need to give me, you need to help me here. You need, that's not how it works. He has to apply. He has to be approved. And I don't think that a lot of countries are going to be out there, protecting people who they think are rapists. So I think that also speaks a lot to that smear too, is that, Rafael Correa, he's not going to allow him, to seek help from Ecuador if that's the kind of person that he thought that he was. That's a PR disaster for him.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
I think that's also something that people need to realize. It's not like he can just demand protection. It's something he had to apply for and be granted. He was also eventually granted Ecuadorian citizenship, which Moreno then, revoked before he called in the hounds. I think that's another important, it's kind of a little off topic, but I think that's another important thing that people need to think about is the United States is currently persecuting and prosecuting an Australian journalist who had dual Ecuadorian citizenship, who was in London, in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, who's never been an American citizen. WikiLeaks is not an American company. And Mike Pompeo has said that he has no First Amendment protections. So what
I don't
this
think Julian
basically
has
means
even
is that,
been to the United States.
yeah. Well, what this basically means is that the United States feels that it has the authority to arrest and charge literally anybody from anywhere at any time, regardless of citizenship or what sort of constitutional rights you may have. So the entire world is subject to our laws, but have no rights to the protections of our Constitution, which is a terrifying prospect. The United States is already a rogue state that's completely out of control, and giving them the power to then go and start arresting journalists and really anybody. I mean, this won't stop at just journalists. If you print or publish, if you tweet something that they don't like, This gives them precedence that they can come, if you're in Germany and you put out a tweet that they don't like, they can come and arrest you. The United States in Germany can come. This gives them, a full ability to control the world more than they already do. So yeah, that's kind of a terrifying prospect that I think a lot of people miss, that this is not an American citizen, and he's being charged with espionage under our laws, and it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, and that raises the question. When we really take an objective look at it, it really does set a horrifying precedent. So why do you think it is that so many politicians, even the ones that are supposedly kind of on our side, like Bernie Sanders or whatever, or the mainstream media, who they release classified information too. They write about classified information, so they could certainly be in line to be treated like Julian Assange, and that's actually why the Obama administration didn't go forward with arresting Assange, is because they're like, well, I mean, the Guardian and the Times and the Post and so forth, have released some of the same information that Chelsea Manning brought forward. So,
I think we have seen a few in the mainstream media start to speak out a little bit. I mean, you'll see like a Chris Hayes, I think, has tweeted out that it sets a dangerous precedent and all of these things.
Tucker
but I think the reason why you're not seeing more in the mainstream media talk about it, and why mainstream media doesn't cover it, they're owned by the people who are funding and arming the war crimes and the war criminals, and I think that CNN is not really ever doing any real adversarial journalism. They're not worried about themselves. They don't do the kind of journalism that would put them at risk. They are mouthpieces for power. They're propagandists. So while they should be concerned, because even if you think that you're safe because you pretty much toe the line and you do what you're told and you write what you're supposed to write and say what you're supposed to say, this doesn't stop here. This will only get worse and more, farther reaching. So while they may think that they're safe, or that they may think that this isn't something that they have to worry about, they do. I think we have started to see a few here and there pop out and speak out. I'd love to see more. Strangely enough, Tucker Carlson is great on this issue. Yeah. He's, not a good dude, but he's amazing on this issue. He had Glenn Greenwald on his show. Glenn knocked that out of the park. It was a fantastic appearance. Haven't seen it. Anybody watching this, please go watch it. It's so good.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that as well.
Carlson, who Trump is known to watch, and he loves Tucker Carlson. And Glenn Greenwald, somebody was saying that, he should have spoke more about, law and order and all that stuff to speak to Trump voters. And I said, he wasn't there to speak to Trump voters. He was there to speak to Trump. Glenn Greenwald was talking directly to Trump. That's who that was aimed at. And he was masterful. It was so good. Yeah. As far as politicians go, this is an incredibly frustrating subject for me. Bernie Sanders is a coward and a fraud. That's my personal opinion. That's just the way I feel about it. This is not a guy who gives a shit about what's happening to Julian Assange. He has had ample opportunity to speak out. He has been asked directly. He essentially ran away from the person asking. I have been calling his offices both in Vermont and in DC for, since the arrest, April 11th of 2019. I would say I've been calling his offices at least 3 or 4 times a week. I've never gotten a response. Anytime I get an intern, they say that we'll give him the message, and then I don't get a response. I have been tweeting at him, sending him emails. He never responds. He's also a guy who has never, not one time, ever said Assange's name. He's never tweeted about him. He's never brought it up, or he's ever asked him. I mean, he doesn't do interviews with unapproved journalists, so he knows he's never going to get asked about it. I don't know why. To me, this is a no-brainer for anybody even claiming to almost be on the left. It's incredibly frustrating to me that I have to be on Twitter with pliers trying to beg people to speak out about this. This is not And it's even more frustrating because it's not like Bernie Sanders couldn't use Obama as cover here. Barack Obama wouldn't prosecute Julian Assange. Bernie Sanders could easily say, Barack Obama wouldn't prosecute Julian Assange because of the implications of the First Amendment. He doesn't even have to really put himself on the line that much. He can use Obama as cover to stand for Assange and for free speech, and he won't do it. I don't know why.
And this cowardice extends to almost all of the so-called progressive Democrats in
None of them.
Congress.
There's only one official who has regularly spoken for Julian Assange, and that is Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
And she did it all through the campaign multiple times. And then when the extradition hearings started back up, I tweeted at her, I think, twice. And within like 12 hours, she had put out a tweet expressing her support for him again. Yeah. So she has always been receptive. She's always been on the right side of this issue. A lot of people have problems with her. I have my own personal problems with her. But she is absolutely solid on this issue and deserves all the credit in the world for doing it, because we can't get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to say anything. We can't get none of the squad, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, none of them. They claim to be progressive. But they won't speak on what is the single most important issue that we're facing right now. This is, and I know that sounds dramatic, but it is really that dramatic. This is the future of free speech. This is the future of investigative journalism. It's the future of your right to be able to know what your government is doing and hold them accountable for it.
So Tulsi Gabbard was, you and I both have our criticisms of her, and also things we like about her, but on this issue, she is the only member of Congress who has very consistently spoken out, and on many other civil liberties and press freedom issues as well. And guess who was the number one target of smear campaigns among electoral candidates over the last couple of years? Her. And I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah, and she never hesitated to speak on behalf of Assange. I remember when she was on Joe Rogan and he asked her, and there wasn't a hesitation at all. Yeah. She said, "What do you mean? Would I drop the charges?" Absolutely. So this isn't even something that she questions. It really is a no-brainer issue. Yeah. And what I don't understand is, I get that politicians are afraid that it might hurt them, or maybe it's your job as a leader and as a politician to make your constituency understand why this is important and why you're speaking on this issue. Yeah. So, are you going to get some pushback because of the rape allegations? Yes, you are. Are you going to get some pushback because people are going to try to claim that Assange is responsible for, people dying, which there's no evidence for that either. But yes, you're going to get pushback. It's your job as an elected official to explain to people why all those smears are crap and why you think it's important to stand up in this situation and support this person, because it's bigger than the person. This really, I try to tell people all the time, this isn't about Julian Assange. Is his life worth fighting for and saving? Yeah, absolutely. But this is so much bigger than just Julian Assange. It really is going to impact and influence every single one of us. The outcome of this case, and for years, 100 years, this is going to influence our lives and our ability to obtain information. So this is so much bigger than just one human being. And it really shouldn't be that difficult for a progressive candidate to be willing to speak on that and be able to explain themselves to people who may have a problem with their position on it. It's really not that hard. It shouldn't be that complicated. And it's genuinely inexcusable that the likes of Bernie Sanders and AOC and Ilhan Omar and all of these people who claim to be, fighting for the people, this is going to affect the people. And the fact that you're not fighting for that is problematic,
Yeah. And, if ever there was any, obvious piece of evidence that this isn't going to stop with Julian Assange, it's the fact that, Glenn Greenwald has already been prosecuted by the Brazilian government using basically exactly the same allegations that were thrown at Julian Assange. And, fortunately, because he's a U.S. citizen, because he has, millions of followers and supporters. He was able to fight off those charges so far, but they tried to get him for the exact same reason. He was digging up dirt on the Brazilian
People
government.
also need to pay attention to what happened to Max Blumenthal. He had some crazy SWAT team show up at his house to arrest him.
Yeah, Medea Benjamin.
For the Venezuelan embassy situation. And people just need to look at how the journalists who are covering the protests are being treated. Journalists are being pepper sprayed and shot with, less lethal ammunition, and they're being beat up and arrested and detained and all of these things. And I mean, look at the way that journalism has been under attack in general. Just the way that, the fact that 90% of our media is owned by 6 companies, and we have all of this consolidation of power, and there are barely any independent sources out there at all anyways, and then the ones that are out there are subjected to crazy algorithm crap that buries their stories on YouTube or on whatever platform you may be on. Your ability to find legitimate information is dwindling quickly. The United States is easily the most, people like to say North Korea is, a propagandized country. The United States is the most propagandized country on planet Earth. There's no question about it.
Yeah. And,
it's only going to get worse.
It's worth mentioning that one of the war crimes that WikiLeaks, as well as others, revealed in Iraq, the Bush administration committed, was they were killing or trying to kill journalists. Literally trying to kill them, and in some cases succeeding, as with the collateral murder incident. Yeah,
and it's only going to get worse. We're seeing it now with the journalists who are covering protests being treated as they're yelling, "I'm with the press, I'm with the press." They're wearing a press vest, and they've got press. They're holding a camera, and the cops don't care. They're still, beating the crap out of them.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing is a direct result of what's happening to Julian Assange. This has been a manufactured consent for the treatment of journalists and journalism. Journalism has been under attack for a very long time, but it was definitely ramped up under the Obama administration, and certainly Trump has taken that and run with it.
Yeah.
So this is a very serious issue. This is maybe people like to think, whatever your pet cause is, whether it's healthcare or the environment or animal rights or whatever it is, you're going to have a hell of a time fighting for that thing if you don't have a free and open press.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to disseminate information. You're not going to be able to have legitimate conversations. You're not going to be able to receive information about where things stand on your issue. This is the front line of all other fights that we face.
Yeah.
And if we lose this one, I don't know how you expect to win any of the others.
Yeah. And that one issue that brings to mind is, of course, the Obama administration, went after Assange in some ways, but didn't actually try to arrest him. The Trump administration did. So I guess what a lot of people wonder about, and I don't know that I can say for sure, but a lot of people wonder, well, what if Biden wins the election? Will the attitude toward Assange change? Will it, or will they do anything different, or is this just a deep state thing that's going to go forward no matter what?
I don't think that Biden would be any different on this issue. I think, like I said before, I don't know if Trump is a willing participant in this or if he's just being used. But I think that they knew that Trump is kind of that kind of figure where he could push this through, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He'll do whatever. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if it's legal. He doesn't care. This is a guy who said, I could go shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and you'd still vote for me. He doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if he's a willing participant in this kind of destruction of journalism and free speech, or if he's just being used as kind of the vessel. But I don't think Joe Biden would be any better on this issue. The Obama administration was crap on journalism. They jailed more journalists and whistleblowers than all other presidents combined. So I think that this is really something that it's really a bipartisan effort, like most things. on matters of war in Wall Street, we have one party. Everything else they use to keep us distracted.
Yes.
And this is one of those things where they are in lockstep with each other. And their methods may vary, and the way that they package their approach to how they deal with it will vary. And, maybe Biden will put a softer and friendlier touch on the destruction of free speech, but it'll still be the destruction of free speech.
Yeah. So given that, I guess, the last thing I wanted to talk about is, given this very gloomy outlook as far as getting help from our people in our government in stopping this, is there reason for hope, and what signs of hope do you see?
Well, I'm a very cynical person, and I, take a lot of crap for that because I can be kind of a negative Nancy. But I just look at it as being realistic.
Yeah.
And right now, things don't look great. I'll say that with the caveat of the court case itself. The prosecution is getting its ass handed to them. Every expert witness is knocking it out of the park because it is really just such a ridiculous case that I can't imagine it being very difficult to tear it apart.
Yes.
But the case is going well in the courtroom, but I think we've all seen that the judge involved is not an impartial actor. There are huge conflicts of interest surrounding this case. She has been
her husband
very
is
harsh.
Her
What's
husband is like he's got ties with weapons contractors.
The judge, yes, Lady Arbanoff. She has a lot of various shady connections that are conflicts of interest. I mean, direct conflicts of interest. And in a situation like this, under ordinary circumstances, somebody like that would recuse themselves. It happens all the time. She refuses to recuse herself from this situation. But also the judge in court is proven herself to be incredibly awful. She, doesn't. She will bend over backwards when the prosecution needs something. When the defense requests something, it's denied every time. It's a very clear. She has a very clear bias. She knows who she's working for. They've managed to scrub the internet of most pictures of her, and we can't find any history on her or anything like that. It's a very interesting situation. So yeah, it's hard for me to have a lot of faith in the UK justice system, given that it's clear that they are owned and operated by the United States government. I don't even think they have any control over what's happening. The only thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that we are seeing a lot more people become aware, and they're starting to speak out more. Like I have said from the very beginning, this is not going to be something that we can depend on our elected officials or the court systems to deal with in a fair way, or our elected officials are not going to help us on this. We're on our own. We are on our own on this. We are all Julian has. And what it really comes down to is they don't want to silence him. They want to silence us. They want to blind us. They want us. He's the guy, he's the figure that everybody's looking at. But this, like I said before, this is so much bigger than him. This really is about them having, kind of carte blanche. They can do whatever they want, and there's no accountability. There's no transparency. They answer to no one. That was already pretty much the case. Like I said, with, 90% of our media being owned by the same 5 or 6 companies, and they all are the same people who own and operate both of our political parties. And it's, one big club that we're not in. But there are still hanging on are these independent journalists. And, there was WikiLeaks, who, is nonpartisan, and the greatest thing, WikiLeaks revolutionized journalism. They don't offer you conjecture or opinion. It's not some talking head, giving their take on things. They are showing you source documentation. And they've never gotten it wrong. They've never had to retract a single word that they've ever published. And so they're giving you source documentation and letting you make up your own mind. They're giving you the evidence and letting you reach your own conclusion.
Yeah,
and we should. It's an invaluable service that I think a lot of people didn't appreciate and, took for granted. I think a lot of Democrats loved it when he exposed the Bush era war crimes. But then when he, released the Hillary Clinton emails, all of a sudden he's the devil. And, I'm somebody who I don't care if the truth hurts somebody I like or somebody I support or whatever. I want to know the truth.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be a matter of, oh, well, he said something that hurt my team or he published something that hurt my politician. You should always want the truth. And that's what he offers to people, just source documentation. And to have a 100% record of accuracy over almost 12 years is an incredible feat for any journalistic operation. And I don't know that there is another one out there who has a record to match.
Yeah. And we should, just to push back against one of the smears that's often thrown at Julian Assange, and in fact is like a basis of the prosecution. They release all this information, but they are very careful to redact information as needed to protect the privacy or safety of sources. And it's actually, in fact, other news outlets that have jeopardized like the confidentiality of whistleblowers. The Intercept's been really bad about that. WikiLeaks has not done that.
Let's say a big hi to Luke Harding from The Guardian, who is a ginormous piece of crap. And he's the one that published the code in his book that, gave people access to stuff that they shouldn't have had access to. And so the places like The Guardian and the New York Times, who were happy to partner with Julian when it benefited them, and they were happy to profit off of publishing the leaks, and they still publish works that are, based off of the leaks, or people use the leaks for, a way to research a subject or whatever. They turned their back on him so fast, and not only did they turn their backs on him, they actively started engaging in propagating the smear campaign. There's still an article to this day written by Luke Harding up at The Guardian about Paul Manafort visiting him at the Ecuadorian embassy. It has long since been debunked.
Yes.
It's it's a completely ridiculous assertion. And it's still up. It's still on their website. Like it's a real thing. Yeah. These people are not good people. They are absolutely propagandists. They are, all they do is take dictation. They're not journalists. That's not journalism. They do as they're told. They write as they're told. They say what they're, told to say.
Stenographers for the ruling class.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, them not liking Julian Assange has to do with just sheer jealousy, that he is, 1,000 times the journalist that they will ever hope to be.
Yeah.
So it's very telling that the same people who were willing to use Julian to profit and to make a name for themselves are now actively engaged in tearing him apart and potentially killing him. I mean, what we're watching right now is a slow motion execution. That's what's happening.
Yeah, his health has suffered tremendously.
They're wearing him down little by little. I think that's been kind of the game plan. I honestly don't even think that they think that this case is going to work, or that if it does, I think that they're just hoping. I mean, like the leak said, they just want to bury him in court cases for the next 25 years. And I mean, he's been subjected to psychological torture for the past 7. And he's,
and
got
held
a
without
ton
charge.
of issues.
Held without charge in maximum security prison, where they typically only put violent criminals. And here's this man.
And terrorists.
And here's this man in solitary confinement a lot of the time in this max security prison, for doing journalism.
And one of my favorite things, when COVID first hit, they asked for compassionate release for Julian Assange. He has an underlying lung condition that makes him very susceptible to the COVID-19 virus. So they asked for compassionate release for him to be sent home, until his trial. And the reason that they gave, and this is a real thing, I can't believe I'm about to say it out loud, but the reason that they gave is that they can't release him because he hasn't been charged with anything.
I didn't know that. That's
I don't
crazy.
know. I don't even know what to say to that. That's a real thing that they said.
Oh my gosh.
So he's an intellectual. He's a journalist. He doesn't have a violent history. He's never committed a violent crime. And he's literally being held without any charges whatsoever in a supermax prison that is reserved for the worst of the worst. And in fact, a few months ago, we even saw a strike by those prisoners protesting the treatment of Julian Assange.
Mm-hmm.
So we now have terrorists and murderers who have more integrity than elected officials and, MPs and judges. So it's a crazy kind of backwards world that we live in, where we have terrorists protesting the mistreatment of a journalist being held without charge in a UK supermax.
Yeah.
It's a crazy world.
Yeah. It is. So just a couple of last things. First of all, where can people go to find out more information about this case and what's going on with it? And then the other thing is where can people look you up and find out more about this issue from you or other issues?
Well, there's one place that you can go to do both of those things. I co-host a show called, it's a group called Action for Assange. They do live streams twice a week on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I usually only co-host on Tuesdays. Every once in a while, I'll pop in on a random Saturday, or if they're, like right now, they're kind of streaming more because they're in DC doing on-the-ground actions for Assange. The Action for Assange crew is amazing. They've been doing a ton of really hard work, forming coalitions with other groups and, trying to get a lot of things accomplished so that we can kind of fight back against this. As far as following the case, there are a ton of really amazing independent journalists doing super incredible work. Some of them are people like Kevin Gostola, Juan Passarelli, who actually just did a documentary film about the Assange case. I actually interviewed him. Sorry, there's my cat every time. But Juan Passarelli just did a amazing documentary. It's like 38 minutes, but it does like a really good kind of concise, here's the last 10 years in 40 minutes. So that's a really excellent documentary if people want to check that out. And he's also one of the 40 journalists who are following the case and live tweeting it. They're following it via the video link. Mohammed Almazi, who I've also interviewed on my show. He's an amazing independent journalist who's doing great work. He's also one of the ones following via video link. Craig Murray does a daily kind of summary of the case every day, and those are genuinely must reads. He's an amazing writer and journalist, and he's been a friend of Julian Assange's for a long time. Let's see who else. I know I'm forgetting a ton of people. Mary Koskatidis, I can never say her name right. Stefania Maruzzi is amazing. John Pilger's amazing. Caitlin Johnstone, Susie Dawson. There are a ton of really good journalists doing amazing work and covering this case in a very real and substantive way. You're not going to find coverage of this on CNN or MSNBC, you'll find it on Fox News. Amazing. Tucker Carlson, who knew?
Yeah. And what's her name? Taylor Hudak with Action Munich, is it?
Activism Munich. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, she's actually one of the co-founders of Action for Assange, but now she's focusing more on her journalism, and she's doing amazing work. She's getting great interviews over there with some of the most informed and influential people surrounding the case. It's something interesting though that we talked about how the media doesn't cover it.
Uh-oh.
Not cover back. Lefty independent media isn't covering it.
Yeah.
For example, the Young Turks hasn't mentioned it once. Tucker Carlson covered it, but the Young Turks didn't. That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, if you have a favorite content creator and they're not covering the Julian Assange case, politely go and ask them to do that. I know that there are a couple of them who have openly admitted that they don't cover it because they're worried that it'll hurt their clicks and their bottom line. I think that's disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I won't mention names, but you know who you are. So yeah, just go ask your content creators, your favorite content creators. If they're not covering it, ask them to. If they are covering it, thank them for doing it. So yeah, and then just, you can find me, I'm on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. And then again, I co-host the Action for Assange live streams. And I also have a show called Facts on the Ground with my friend Jesse. And we've had some really incredible interviews. Like I said, we interviewed Juan Pasquarelli about his documentary. We've talked to Dan Cohen about Palestine and Israel. We have a series running on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So we have a lot of really cool interviews with really interesting people. Kind of our goal is to cover things that don't ordinarily get covered, and do like real deep dives into these issues. So yeah, that's, you can find me at all of those places. And, all I can ask of anybody watching this is, if you can talk to one person about Julian Assange today, do it. It's great to tweet at people. I do that a lot. That's something that everybody can do, but also, talk to people in your community, talk to your mom, talk to your sister, your neighbor, whatever. And if you are having trouble, I know it's a very convoluted and complicated case. It can be a little overwhelming to talk about it, because there is so much involved. But the Caitlin Johnstone article that you mentioned is great for kind of combating any of the smears. And there are a lot of really great resources out there that will give you real information and, kind of tear away all of the crap and, all the noise that surrounds this case, and really get down to the heart of what matters. So yeah, that we really need a lot of people. It's going to take an army of voices to stop this before it gets too far.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Misty, for coming on the show and letting people know what's going on with this. You're a real fount of information about it, and everybody should look Misty up and other people that she mentioned, and find out more about this case, and do what you can to get the truth out there, and stand up for Julian Assange, because first they're coming for Julian Assange, but they will definitely come for a lot of the rest of us for saying things they don't want anybody to hear if we don't speak in defense of him. So please, everybody, like and share and subscribe to the video, comments with any thoughts you have or questions, and I will see you guys next time with another episode of The Bitter Pill.